All right, this is the first episode of the Huddle on High Street, brought to you by DonLion Pro, and I just want to get into, some of this Kyle McCord stuff. Officially, will transfer is the word on the street. That's the official word from he made a statement too. It's all from the portal, and I think this is actually a win for Ohio State in a lot of ways. A lot bigger of a win than I think people think. I think there was a little bit of pushback on it at first, like, oh yeah, he had 3,000 yards, and he had a decent year. Only 7 quarterbacks in Ohio State history have thrown for 3,000 yards. Now, part of that is because obviously their offense has drastically changed in the turn of the 21st century, but still, he did something that only 7 quarterbacks have ever done, and then you have to kind of put it into context, though. He didn't do that with, a banged up receiver room. He did that with perhaps maybe the greatest college football wide receiver ever, potentially, in Marvin Harrison Jr. He actually, as this video goes down, he just got invited to New York to partake in the Heisman ceremony. So he's going to be, I think they only invited like 4 guys. So that's pretty big. That's pretty big. But, what is this Kyle McCord leaving? What does this mean for Ohio State, and like, where do they go from here? And I think what it really was at that point is I think Ryan Day had a sit down with them. And he was like, look, I got to beat Michigan. It's not necessarily you, but at the same time, I can't today commit that you will be the starting quarterback next year. I have to go out. I have to look and see what I can get. I have to beat Michigan. My job's going to be in question if I don't next year. He's got to compete for the national title too. So I think he had that sit down with McCord, and McCord was like, all right, well, if I'm not guaranteed my spot, then I'm just going to have to go ahead and I'm going to have to enter this portal. And that's just what had to be done at that point. And there's nothing personal there. I feel like there can't be at that point, but it was time. I mean, he had so many misses this season, even in games that weren't Michigan. Like the Notre Dame game, debatably could have lost that game. McCord, there was like 2 or 3 interceptions that on that final drive where we got pretty lucky. There was only 10 men on the field. He missed, the Notre Dame players missed catching 2 easily thrown interceptions. And then, obviously against Michigan, that would bite us. The first interception was terrible. The second one was justified because you got to get the ball out of there. You can't risk the sack, obviously, with that little amount of time. But I think that if he could have had maybe a second one in the pocket, maybe in the alternate reality, who knows, maybe he hits Marvin Harrison Jr. on that post. He didn't, and that's why we're here right now. Where will McCord go from here? I think it's looking like either a lower tier Big Ten school or somewhere in the ACC. I was hearing a lot of speculation about Pitt. Pitt is definitely a possibility. I think that he's got family connection and ties to Rutgers. That could be a possibility. Boston College. It's another team where I could see him moving to, but he actually has a pretty good transfer portal ranking. He's like number 12 overall out of all transfer portal players, like non-QBs as well. He's number 12. So, I mean, that tells me that he might be able to go somewhere better. But I think it's going to be like an ace. I could see him going to Pitt. I think Pitt makes the most sense. Could he go to Rutgers? Maybe. But I see him getting far away from the Big Ten Conference. But I'm not sure. But with Ohio State at this point, what do you have in that room right now? You have Lincoln Keenholz and you have Devin Brown, which I think Devin Brown's gone after this bowl game. But that's who you're going to have to commit to for this game against Missouri, which obviously at this point, we don't care about this game against Missouri. Ryan Day doesn't care about this game against Missouri. He literally called in the press conference similar to the spring game. So that's going to tell you what that is. Probably Ohio State's probably going to lose wildly in this game, but they're going to assess the talent that they have at the skill player position. And then from there, they're going to figure out, like what we have at this point. What, like Carnell Tate should be the one of the main guys in the rotation. Dallin Hayden should be the premier back. We just got to make sure of that. And another thing, I think they were feeling pressure that possibly they could lose Jeremiah Smith if McCord would have stayed. And, Jeremiah Smith, the number 1 recruit in the country, one of the better receiving prospects I've ever seen. So that's a guy you definitely want to keep if you're Ohio State, especially with Marvin Harrison Jr. and Mecca Buka going to the draft. And you already have a Nis and Carnell Tate on the roster. So those 3 together could become maybe the most lethal combination of receivers we've ever had. I mean, there's a lot of brightness and upside there. But maybe that wasn't the quarterback. You do have Aaron Nolan coming in, a quarterback that earlier on the channel I did watch some of his high school tape. Has really good accuracy from what I've seen. Bit of a power runner. Reminds me a little bit of Jalen Hurts. Similar frame. Runs the ball really cleanly. But is he going to be ready right off the bats to just plug in there and say, hey, we got to win a national championship? That's a lot of pressure put on a young guy. So what I'm thinking is most likely, I think the dream scenario for Ohio State is you bring in it's like an older transfer that's only going to be there for 1 year. That's the dream scenario. But one of the guys they're eyeing, he would have 2 more years of eligibility, and that is UCLA's Dante Moore. Now, Dante Moore was a really, highly recruited guy coming into last year's class, went to UCLA, had somewhat of a shaky season, but it's tough. I mean, he was a true freshman, started some games for UCLA. UCLA, not the best team. It was kind of a packed year in the Pac-12 too. So it can be difficult at that point, but I think Dante Moore, really good prospect. His game is very similar to that of CJ Stroud, where, he is more of a pocket quarterback, but when he needs to make the play to get out of the pocket, he can. The thing is, he'd be younger, but this is the same thing that he did with Justin Fields early on in the season. That's why I thought there was no way that we were going to go into this year with Kyle McCord as the quarterback. I thought there was no way that he was going to do that because we saw very early, before he had even coached a full season as the coach of Ohio State, he had brought Justin Fields in instead of Tate Martell, who everybody thought the starter was going to be. So he did that, and that's why I was kind of shocked. It's like the Ryan Day in 2019 seemed to be a lot more open to taking risks and going for it on 4th down and stuff like that than the Ryan Day we have seen in 2023. And 2 kind of different guys. So I think he's looking at himself. He's looking at his job to be on the line. And he's saying, I got to go back to being the day that got me to where I am. I got to stop listening to people. I got to make my decision. Is this my career and this is my job on the line? He's the one getting the pushback now. So he had to make the decision. And, I don't think he sat, like I said, I don't think he sat down Kyle McCord and was like, it's over. We don't want you here anymore. I think he told him, we're going to bring somebody in, and it's going to be a battle. Nothing is going to be guaranteed to you. Kyle McCord, being the quarterback that I think he is, fell over and said, I'm going to transfer. You know what? Fine. Do it. Some of these guys that we have the potential to bring in at Ohio State could be game changers. They could be game-changing people with, like I said, we keep Jeremiah Smith. If Ohio State keeps their 5-star, this could be a heck of a roster. I mean, Dallin Hayden is a really good running back. He has showed that in different games, that he can definitely carry the load as the back. He's pretty much had 2 big games where he's been featured. And in both those games, he has surprised everybody and played very, very well. So with that being said, we should be fine at back. The O-line's only getting older, so they should be better. The defense, there's a bit of concern. I mean, you're losing a lot of guys. You're losing Denzel Burke. You're losing JTT, potentially Jack Sawyer. You're losing a lot of people. But I think they'll be able to recover. It's Ohio State. I mean, you're bringing in more people. I think the main issue right now is you just got to get that offense back to humming. especially if they keep Jim Knowles. I heard Jim Knowles had a few interviews with other teams. I don't think he leaves, but if he does, then I mean, they'll figure it out. It's Ohio State. They're going to figure that out. But you need to bring in the right quarterback. Another guy, Cam Ward, had a really good year at Washington State. That would be a possible guy that you could bring in and be like, all right, we could rock with this guy. It could be a very big possibility. He's got 65% completion rate. It's just I think he had 48 touchdowns. He had 48 touchdowns in 2 years. Still a lot. I think that if they were to get him, he's a veteran presence. He could definitely maneuver through that OSU system. But I don't think he's the only guy. I mean, you could target the Clemson DJ Underlay, but I don't know how well that would work. He has been decent, is probably the word to use him in his career. Like, obviously, had some hardship at Clemson. The year at Oregon State, it was a bounce back year for him. He had 2,600 yards, 21 touchdowns with Oregon State, but at the same time, I don't know. He had those struggles at Clemson. He is an older guy now, but would this be that much different than McCord is what you got to kind of look at. So DJ could be an option, though. I don't think it'd be absolutely terrible. Another guy is the Kansas State guy, Will Howard. He has had some pretty good games in his career, obviously. In the Big 12 title game a year ago, he played decently well. I don't think he's the reason they won that game. I think Deuce Vaughn kind of took over, but I don't think it'd be a terrible option. I don't think that Will Howard would be the answer, but that is just me. And then, like I said, you have the Dante Moore UCLA player who I think that this would make the most sense to me. Just like after like kind of looking at his skill set, seeing what he's good at. Ryan Day has done it before with a similar prospect that was Fields. Fields hadn't even played. I don't think Fields had even started a game in college, though. This guy, Dante Moore, has some of that experience with starting games in college football. And I think he started some pretty good games. I mean, I think there was a game against USC that he played in. But like I said, Dante Moore, it seems like a guy. You also have Riley, Leonard Riley, I believe, the Duke quarterback, which bigger built quarterback guy. I'd be fine with it. It'd definitely be an upgrade from McCord, but I don't know. I don't know how much of an upgrade that would be. Because at this point, you need an accurate guy. Like I said, the Dante Moore guy, similar to C.J. Stroud, very accurate quarterback. You want an accurate guy at this point. And then the only other guy of note is Dylan Gabriel, who had a really good year for Oklahoma. They should have been in the Big 12 championship game. Obviously, had that bad loss to Oklahoma State, and they were left out of it. Lost a few rough games. They did beat Texas, who's in the college football playoff, but he's going to actually go and he's going to get one more year. I think it'd be his 6th year playing. I wouldn't mind him at OSU, but like within this Ryan Day offense, he is kind of trying to get away from the running quarterback, and he likes, like I said, the more accurate pocket presence guy. So I don't know how good of a fit that would be. Could I see it as a possibility? Yeah, sure. And I think that's what you're looking with at this point. I think you got Dante Moore as an option. You have Cam Ward as an option. You have Lincoln Riley, Leonard Riley as an option. You have Dylan Gabriel as an option. And you potentially have, I believe, DJ Underlay, and they were eyeing Will Howard a little bit. So there's a big slate of just QBs that you could go after to try to get this done. But he's going to bring in the best guy feels. we should have our pick. OSU should have the pick of their litter. I mean, everybody wants that. They should offer these guys at least $2 million, whichever one they're going to get. I know it sounds crazy, but it is Ohio State, the biggest donors, and just spend the money, just get them. If you spend the money to get these talented guys, you will not regret it come time of the postseason, come time against Michigan. So don't be afraid to spend the money on getting the best possible guy. But I think this is a win for Ohio State just in general. Ohio State had to move on from McCord. He is an average quarterback at best, maybe even below average, and it was just time that there had to be a different direction. There had to be a different direction with McCord. And, it's somewhat unfortunate for him, but that's just the direction that it needed to be. He didn't have a bad year by any stretch, but he really choked in the games that mattered. And OSU should have lost that game against Notre Dame. They should have. He did not play well in that game. So in the two big games where there was decent competition, he just did not play that well. And that's why you had to move off Kyle McCord. I did want to segue into talking about the college football playoff. Haven't really covered anything since then. What I think of Florida State being left out of it in general. I think it was the right call. I watched the ACC title game on Saturday. I watched it, and I'm sitting there and I'm saying, this is not a top 10 team in the country. I didn't even think they were a top 10 team in the country, guys. And it sucks for them too because they have talent on that roster. But Jordan Travis was just a key reason why they were as good as they were. And even with Jordan Travis, they were shaky. They were a shaky team even when they had him. And he was a big factor. He was in 2013 when Braxton Miller had that ridiculous year. It was kind of like that. But imagine if Braxton Miller, and this is before JT Barrett, Cardell, this is the year before that. They weren't really on the roster. Imagine if he would have gotten hurt on the 2013 or 2012 team. They wouldn't have been, it would not have been what it was. Jordan Travis had really cemented them as a good team. And you saw in that ACC championship, they almost lost to terrible Florida. And they narrowly beat a pretty bad Louisville team who really hasn't played anybody. So when you factor all that, you put all that together, you have to leave them out. Maybe in another year where the competition wasn't as steep, maybe you could have left them in. But I mean, I don't know what else you do. It's a 4-team playoff, and I think Georgia should have gotten in before them too. I don't know how they were ranked above Georgia, but I think the committee got it right. Michigan was going to be number 1. They were going to beat Iowa in that game. Iowa shouldn't have played in that game. Obviously, it should have been Ohio State versus Michigan, the rematch, but luckily they're fixing it next year. But obviously you have that system, the East-West thing. It's a good thing they're getting rid of it. Very good thing they're getting rid of it. But you have Michigan at the number 1. Number 2 had to be Washington. They shocked a lot of people. I was utterly shocked that as you look at the first game where Oregon and them played, and Oregon had that game won in several aspects, and they just made bad decisions. This second game was the score is much closer than the indication of what that game was. That was a Washington rout at times. Obviously, Oregon got that big touchdown in 2 plays when they needed it, but their defense couldn't get a stop. So Washington, they're deserving of the number 2 spot. Pac-12 was the toughest it's been in a long time, and I think that's fine that they're right there. Texas, I like them at number 3. They showed up in their championship game. I don't care if it's Oklahoma State. They won big in their conference championship game. If they would have played like Florida State in their conference championship game, there's probably a different story. They're probably on the other side looking in. Now, obviously, Alabama winning did help them, but at the same time, they took care of business in the Big 12 championship game. That is why they're in. When they have Ewers, they're clearly a good team. And then you go to number 4. You go to Alabama. That they were a play away against Auburn from just being out of it pretty much entirely. And somehow, some way, they get that play to go. And then they go into the Georgia Dome or whatever that's called, but it was in Atlanta for the SEC title game. And they snap a 29-game win streak of the Georgia Bulldogs. It's crazy. And they were dominant in that game, too. They won that game convincingly. So they definitely deserve their spot, too. I think they win the national championship at this point. If I'm going to have to give predictions, you have the Michigan-Alabama game, and you have the Washington-Texas game. Washington-Texas game is a little tougher to tell, but I think the Michigan-Alabama game, I know that I do think it's been a down year in the SEC, but at the same time, this has really given me kind of vibes to 2014, where Ohio State was able to beat number 1 Alabama, and then they played to Oregon and beat them. Alabama now this year kind of seems like they counted out all season. They were like at 8 of the rankings the entire year until this week, till they shocked the world and beat Georgia. That's kind of like Ohio State, 2014, we didn't know. And now it's vice versa, where the 4 seed is the SEC, 1 seed is the Big Ten. And does Michigan have probably the most complete roster left in this thing? Yes. Does Michigan on paper look like probably the best team left in this thing? Yeah. But they have not had a lot of success in these bowl games the past 2 years, especially in that game against Georgia in the SEC. They did not play well. So I think Alabama wins that game. I think it's close, but I think Alabama, finds the way to get that win. And then I think Washington shocks the world again, beats Texas. I mean, Texas, they're a really good team, but like I said, they didn't. Big 12's kind of weak as well. And the one team that they did play in the Big 12 was Oklahoma, and they lost. So I think Washington, Alabama in that championship game, and I think Alabama takes it. That's just my thought, like right off the bat today, right now. Just because I think Jaden Milroe, he is just really improved as a playmaker in general. But, aside from that, going back to the Florida State, that's what happens sometimes in football. That's why this year of Florida State is the exact epitome of why this 4-team system is going to be extinct next year. Ohio State losing that one game by 6 points to Michigan, where they had a chance to win and not even having a chance at the final week to be in the conversation for the title, is another epiphany to why the college football playoff needed to expand. And I think there's only about 7 teams that actually could have won the title, but there's 7 teams that could have won the title. You got to think about that. 7 teams could have won the title, only 4 of them get to go in. Like Georgia wins 29 in a row, wins 12 this year, loses 1 game in the SEC championship game, and their season is over. It's kind of crazy. If I were a Georgia fan, I'd be very upset by that. Like I said, Florida State goes undefeated, does what they have to do, and they're left out of the playoff. Ohio State loses the 1 game to Michigan, out of the playoff. It's a crooked system, but the system's breaking. Next year, all those teams would be in. So, I mean, it's tough for the teams that were left out. They did the bowls are okay. I mean, you did pin Florida State versus Georgia in the Orange Bowl. Not the game I wanted to see. Obviously, I would have rather had like Ohio State and Georgia rematch in the Orange Bowl. How cool would that have been? But I guess you had to send Florida State to the Orange Bowl because they won the ACC championship game, and that's kind of like their old feeder bowl. I get that. But you could have had them play Mizzou. Then you could have had the Ohio State-Georgia rematch, and although it doesn't matter, You're still like, those two programs are rematching. Maybe somebody wants to come back because there's bad blood there. Terrible job by the committee not doing that, because you had the window to do it and you didn't do it. You now have matched up Florida State and Georgia, which, I mean, maybe Florida State wins because Georgia, a lot of people might sit out, but Florida State just isn't any good without Jordan Travis. That's the problem. So that is just a tough, tough situation. I will go and talk about the other transfer portal names that left. I want to start off on McCord, then I did want to give my thoughts on the playoff. Julian Fleming goes, and I'm pretty sure, I think he technically would have had one more year of eligibility because of the whole COVID thing. I think he would have technically had one more year of eligibility, but he does end up going. I don't see this as a big loss for us at all. He underachieved at Ohio State. Was it terrible? No. He had some good plays. He had some good moments. But for the guy we brought in, the stars that he was, the rating level as a recruit that he was, he wildly failed at Ohio State. And, he was one of those guys where I really thought that, it was always that next year he's going to make that big step, and he never really did. So I think, it's probably a good thing they transferred. We don't want him getting in the way at this point of, and, you sometimes you just got to say it how it is. We don't want him getting in the way of the progression of Carnell Tate, Brandon Inniss, and soon to be Jeremiah Smith. Would he have been a good veteran voice in the locker room? For sure, but just didn't want him to get in the way of that. And maybe, he chose to transfer someone. I don't know where he will go. I assume he's probably going to go to a bigger school. There's a lot of options out there. Maybe he does what Jameson Williams does, goes to Alabama. Don't really know at this point. It's really early within the portal. And then you had Evan Pryor went as well. Running back who we never really got to see. I think we got to see him do a few plays. Didn't really get the full experience of Evan Pryor. Had a lot of injury problems, had a lot of issues. But, we have guys like Dallin Hayden coming in. We have, I believe we do have other recruited running backs that are going to step in. Chip Trainum might be there for one more year. I need to check what year he's at, but he might have one more year. I think next year, though, like I said, should be the Dallin Hayden show, and that's what it should be overall. I'm going to be doing this pretty much every week. I think since pretty much Ohio State football is kind of done at this point, it's probably just going to be more college football news. Could switch to, some of the basketball side of the stuff. That's a possibility. But for now, yeah, Kyle McCord entering the transfer portal, and the college football playoffs is set. Florida State is left out.